Would help to have some audio. There we go. Hello, people. Welcome to Monday night, if it's evening for you. Welcome to the Monday live stream. Every Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we talk about neurofeedback and we dig into some biohacking topic. And tonight we're going to talk about stimulants, a topic that is often showing up in relation to attention or neurofeedback or brains in general. So I thought it would be interesting to give you a little bit of a perspective that I have on how stimulants might work and function, and show you some evidence, show you some pre-post maps from the same people within the same day or within a day or two apart. So in general, when doing these live streams, if this is your first one, hello, I'm Andrew Hill. I'm the founder of Peak Brain Institute, and I helped co-found True Brain and several other biohacking type projects, and I am here to teach you about things including your brain and how to take control of it. So a lot of the techniques that I use are focused around brain mapping and neurofeedback, and the Monday night live streams we typically do a little bit of both. So let me set up a neurofeedback session, and then we'll talk a little bit about how stimulants work. Let me turn off the show title. There we go. So hello, people who are rolling in. Nice to see you. I'm guessing you can hear me. I had the audio off there for a second. But say hello and ask questions as you have them. The first thing I'm going to do is do a little bit of neurofeedback and then talk about stimulants. So let me put myself down here and walk you through a setup. So I'm using software called EEG. So let me select myself, plan a session. Here we go. We can actually see my monitor a little bit better, I think, this time. Often the computer I'm on is a huge monitor, which makes the EEG screen teeny. And this is a regular size monitor and a regular sized EEG screen. So EEG software we use to train the brain, specifically neurofeedback. And you can see here we have a head plot set up. And this is set up for a C3A1 protocol, a left side training protocol, which I'm not going to do tonight. So let me actually remove these, delete current. I remove the top set of setup and run pairs. That's how EEG does its configuration protocol segments. A setup is the segment configuration and a run is a time. Let's do 9 minutes of C4 minus A1. We'll be a little gentler tonight. 12 hertz is fine. And then after this run, we'll add another setup. So you can say insert after twice, change the second one to a run. Let's make that 9 minutes. And for this, I'll do a vertex or a CZ protocol. These are both what are called SMR protocols. They're different variants of SMR. And change that to a setup. Tap the head, check the frequencies, 4 to 7. SMR is the reward frequency. In this case, it's going to be 11.5. 11.5 to 14.5, which is a low beta wave frequency, and SMR is a rather magical frequency in a bunch of ways. Oh, you see it turn pink there when I put the number in. That's because I typoed it and put a 0.6. It doesn't like that division. 22 to 34, actually 20 to 32, I think. So what I'm doing is setting up frequency ranges, or telling the computer to prepare to measure different aspects of my brain. And this one's still pink, which means it's set up wrong. Let's type over at 14.5. There we go. All right, and then auto goal. I'm manually entering these things. If you work with Peak Brain, these auto goals should already be set up. But what this is doing is telling the software how often it should move next to my brain for these things it's measuring, essentially, and how close to where my brain already is should it move. It's called thresholding. It's how the software adapts moment to moment. I think that's all set up properly. Yeah, so I'm going to do a few minutes of C4, which is the right side of the head, then a few minutes of the vertex, which is CZ. So, hey Jehan, nice to see you. When it comes to run times, why isn't longer better? Good question. Longer can be better for some protocols. And for what I'm doing today, I mean, these are not clinical length protocols. I'm doing 9-minute segments. I did already do some HEG earlier today, but A true, what I would consider a full protocol for an adult would be 15 minutes times 2, or one thing for potentially up to 30 minutes, but not everything trains well for a full half hour. It's kind of like exercise, especially intense exercise. You hit a point where you're fatiguing the system versus encouraging learning, and that creates a pretty big drain and can create weird side effects. And at that point, it's hard to tell the wrong protocol apart from just overtraining. And so it's really good to ease into protocols so you can evaluate how people are responding without worrying about if you're conflating an overtraining effect with maybe a protocol that isn't ideal. So that's one reason why you build up the time. But people will also fatigue out over, even classic training protocols, old school ones where you would use different software than this. You might do 33 to 36 minute protocols, and those can be taxing for people. So that's my recommendation, is to stay around half an hour unless you just don't feel it ever. And then creeping up is fine. I found when I was first doing it to myself that I needed to do about 18 minutes of one thing before I would really notice it. But I can get effects now doing 12, 9 minutes. I'll get some effect from this tonight. I might feel it tonight, I might not, but I will probably have a slight change in my sleep tonight and how I feel tomorrow during the day from the SMR protocol. And SMR has the SMR training has the quality of regulating sleep and executive function, but it also is one of the things we can use to change tolerance to psychostimulants, to Adderall and Ritalin and things. So if you do neurofeedback with classic protocols, and these are a couple examples, you'll often create a fairly strong washout of tolerance, which effectively feels like the medication has gotten very, very strong. So I tell people who are starting to do neurofeedback that they should maybe, project out 3-4 weeks and keep an eye open for what feels like over-medication effects. Appetite suppression, sleep onset issues, feeling irritable. Because if you're taking Adderall, Ritalin, etc. consistently and you drop the brain's tolerance to it with neurofeedback, you'll end up with this sensation that you're taking too much. Now that's usually a good thing. You can use that phenomena to kind of step down in your dosing, which is useful. But if you don't know it's going to happen, it can jump out and get in the way sometimes when combining neurofeedback with stimulants. So that's a more topical answer, I think, for this topic. But let's talk for a second about what prescription stimulants do while I set up the wires in my head. And I think I have to probably take this off. So I have 3 electrodes tonight. I'll move one of them. I have very straightforward electrodes. Let's see. Just basic silver wires, couple clips, and one flat wire. The flat wire is green, so I'm plugging that into my active socket. The other wires are black and blue for the clips. So I'm plugging those into my reference and my ground. When I say reference, what that means is if you subtract what's in the red socket from the black socket, that's your signal. And the green socket is the ground. It doesn't really matter where on the head or on the body a ground wire goes. It just needs contact. So I've already forgotten. Ground wire is my blue clip. So little silver ear clips, some electrolyte paste called 1020 paste. And I'll be dabbing that on there. Jehan is asking, is caffeine in a different category? It's in a different category in terms of making you too sensitive to it. It doesn't usually do that. It actually makes people more able to tolerate the effects of caffeine sometimes. In fact, often if they're not able to handle it and they get activated by it or anxious from it or something, they can handle it pretty well after some neurofeedback. The other clip is going in my other ear. I am going to show you some maps tonight, Jehan, which review what happens in the brain with caffeine. So... okay, now I have one wire handy, and that's going to get moved. It's just a flat wire. So I'm just going to take that, and you can see there actually is a side to these things. It can be hard sometimes to tell what side you're on, but you want to think of an electrode as a scoop or a trowel that you're trying to cover the underside of. Sorry, so right-hand side, let's see. Find the vertex, no more further back than the crease in your ear. Go up about an inch, that's T4. Halfway between these two will be C4, so right there. And usually it's good to stick paste to paste when you're bald and not just paste to skin, but I'll get away with it. Radar Ashwood is saying, glad to hear we might have a new office in SF. We have a former peak brain person, someone who has her own office, who's in SF area, who's going to start doing some brain maps for us. So we'll have some local brain mapping available. Is that what you heard about Radar Ashwood? We haven't decided to open up a physical peak brain in San Francisco or the Bay Area. We would just need a partner to do that. All right, let's see. I'm going to start this off and see how it goes. Wrong keyboard. There we go. So you guys can hear me okay? Audio quality sufficient tonight? You're manifesting it? You're just wishing it into existence, Radar? The San Francisco office? I appreciate that. Nice. All right. So I'm effectively on a single monitor setup. So what that will mean is when you start the game, it'll be on the screen, and then you can use the space bar to toggle back and forth. So let me just run something pretty basic like v.mazes, variable.mazes, which is mazes that have variable dots. All right, so what it's done is it's brought up the eager screen. Just make sure you guys can see this. Yes, you can. And let me cover this little nonsense right there. All right, so just above me we have a raw signal, and that raw signal is all the waves coming off that wire. So if I move my head, things move a little bit, add some noise to the signal. If I clench my jaw, that's muscle activity blowing out the signal. And as you can see there, where that little moment of muscle activity happened, it also created a gap below it in the filtered bands. You can tell basically it's clipping out the signal, preventing noise from getting filtered in and measured. So once a clean EEG is being picked up, or mostly clean EEG is being picked up, what it will then do is it'll measure out the three bands. This is 4 to 7, 12 to 15, and 22 to 34. And the 12 to 15 is the SMR. And you can see that there's a green line right now through most of that 12 to 15 hertz. And that means that I'm making enough of it to be outside the threshold lines, or you can see below the trace, the average is 6.7 microvolts and the threshold is 5.75. So the average wave height is 6.9 microvolts now, and the more static lines are set basically to stop the game from running whenever the amplitude dips too low within those ranges. And the opposite's true for the 4 to 7 band that's right next to me here, and that's an inhibit band. So I'm making 13 microvolts of that. I want to make less of that, so I've set the threshold at 19.75 microvolts. And what that means is as long as I stay below that, it'll let the game run. And then we have a 22 to 34 down there as well. So let's kick off the game. I'm going to hit, it looks like it's all scaled pretty well. So I'm just going to make sure nothing's selected and then hit F5. It's kind of loud. And again, it's just showing me the traces. So if you want to see the game, you would hit spacebar. And now little Pac-Man, he's hiding behind me now. So on this game, what you're seeing is Pac-Man is moving through mazes. And whenever the dots get big, the Pac-Man will stop. Pac-Man also can turn black. And so you saw what happened when I clipped out the signal adding muscle tension before to the raw signal. Let's see what happens to the game when I do it. So I stopped the Pac-Man by adding too much artifact. First it caught some high beta, so it went black, and then it slowed down and stopped because there wasn't enough reward, I believe. We can also see the amplitude of the theta brainwave, the slow inhibit, or the theta, is reflected in the size of the dots. So even if you're not looking at the traces, you can sort of see what's going on there. And Jahan has a good question, which is, oops. It seems your theta is more than twice your SMR. Is that to be expected? It probably is at this stage of the game, late in the day, having worked a long day, kind of tired. I also had a migraine today that was pretty significant, and I trained it away. It was kind of cool. Yesterday and today, I had migraines, and yesterday I was like, oh, my vision's all screwy. Oh, well. And then it really came on hard, and I pulled out the HEG, and I did train it down and away, but it still took a couple hours to resolve. And then today I felt one kind of starting to come up again, so I grabbed the HEG quickly because I was all set up to stream for you guys. And I trained for about 5-10 minutes, or maybe 6 minutes, and I really abated it and avoided a migraine, which was pretty great. So it's probably that. There's probably like a fatigue phenomena showing up in that I have a 2-to-1 theta to beta ratio. So I've also been up for 16 hours. So, all right. So, in terms of stimulants, we can talk about prescription stimulants, right? But most of those will boost dopamine and norepinephrine essentially, and they sharpen attention. They also increase energy or wakefulness. We have caffeine. Caffeine doesn't boost dopamine or classic neurotransmitters. Instead, it blocks adenosine, which allows other, it's a phosphodiesterase inhibitor. So it boosts dopamine a little bit that way, but mostly it's about blocking adenosine. And then, you can think of all stimulants as being sort of arousal or stimulating phenomena. And each one will look a little different in the EEG. Radar is asking what's causing my migraines. I'm not sure. Fatigue, stress. Probably not stress. I'm actually pretty well regulated. Probably just fatigue. I think I may have over caffeinated a couple days in a row, too late in the day, and that can do it. Kind of put me in a weird caffeine withdrawal cycle. Will trigger it. What coding languages do I know? None well. Years ago, I wrote a book on PHP, beginning PHP 4 databases, where I did a lot of work on ODBC and sort of basic database connections. I was working at a database middleware company, and I have some database experience, but I still hadn't been much of a programmer. Recently, I've been programming in TypeScript, JavaScript, HTML, basic stuff like that for web apps. And I do have some good database experiences, so I know things like SQL. And store procedure language and that kind of stuff, but not much of a programmer. Maybe I'm a bit of a software hacker, designer, architect, something. These days, as a vibe coder, you don't need to know any languages to build good software. You just know you need to know how to architect the software, which is a skill. And I think with some domain expertise and a bit of tech knowledge, people can become software architects these days. Interesting question. Thank you. All right. So I'll show you some EEG of the stimulants in a second, but I did want to talk about, again, the idea that if you do these protocols consistently, one thing that will happen is you'll end up changing how you respond to stimulants. So let's see. I have some notes here. Stimulants will delay fatigue, enhance sustained attention, enhance endurance. That's why they're often banned in competitive sports. But they have a inverted U, a Yerkes Dodson curve of arousal, meaning a little bit of stimulant phenomena often improves performance, reaction time, sustained attention. A little more will often maybe get a little bit better. But at some point you turn the corner and you're on the far side of the U curve, and the dosages are throwing you off. And I'm sure anyone who loves coffee, who's drank a little too much, will have some perspective on the far side of that Yerkes Dodson curve, the stress versus arousal curve. So a lot of times, especially with caffeine, the stimulants are good for short-term support, but not sort of a long-term, relying on them too much to offset sleep or, energy for its own sake. Also, stimulants, be it prescription or caffeine, I'm cruising here because I'm thinking hard. Stimulants, be it prescription or caffeine, will have some impact on the circadian rhythm, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine and having it in the afternoon. It can really throw people off. Caffeine tends to have a half-life of between 3 and 6 hours for elimination. So call it 4.5. And generally drugs that are short acting will have an impact on the EEG for 5 half-lives. So what you're having with caffeine then is about 22 hours. So caffeine can build up in your system because of that, or still be pretty high, strong in your system later in the day if you're having it. We also have low cortisol in the afternoon, so having caffeine at that point can really hit us hard. Joe Barr is asking, is there a way to incorporate stimulants in diet as a performance enhancement with minimal addiction? I mean, used as prescribed, stimulants actually don't have too much addictive potential. And that's true of some more than others. Things in the methylphenidate category, like the Ritalins, the Concertas, those don't have too much abuse potential. And then Adderall does, dexamphetamine does. But if you use them as prescribed, you don't usually get this sort of creeping tolerance phenomena that creates addiction. There's no euphoria. They're not especially rewarding. So I don't think generally they create significant risk of addiction unless somebody who has drug addiction difficulties, they may find that anything that's an adulterant or an alterer can be abused. And so they may abuse those things much more easily because they are stimulants. So, you can develop tolerance to them a little bit and maybe some dependence. There is some addiction quality in that sense, but not aggressively. And if you look at the literature, there's mixed literature on the impacts of stimulants. There's some literature showing that stimulants given to adolescents may normalize brain development. There's some literature showing that if you give ADHD adolescent stimulants, you mask the behavior of ADHD, but you don't create any ability to study or think well. And so you end up with kids that can't manage their ADHD, even medicated in college, because they never learned to move through executive function resources, even though their impulsivity may have been controlled or something. You also can see side effects on appetite, especially with younger kids. That's actually significant. And I think that's one of the reasons parents often come to get neurofeedback, is because the side effects in terms of increasing anxiety or decreasing appetite are actually quite significant, and that can be really true in kids. Let's see. Okay, got to change my electrodes. So we're going from C4 to CZ, so that's the vertex. And Eager's pretty forgiving. You can get away with just moving a wire. All right, the vertex, you do create some noise in the screen, but, that's okay. All right, the vertex, yeah, we're good. Let the signal recover for a second. And it's recovered. You can see, there we go. Got some good signal. Now, it does take about 10 seconds to create the averages. You can see my averages are kind of weirdly static and low, and now they're jumping. Now that we got a full sweep going, we're going to get a little more robust averages. There we go. Cool. All right, let me kick off this segment. Let's do a function F11, F9, and F11 to autoscale, and then F5. The ranges were a little different. Oh, I see F5 again. F5. There we go. The ranges of frequencies were a little bit different. That's why I scaled things the way that I did. Cool. So, the impacts, or the literature of the impact of stimulants on people, it's very mixed. There is some literature showing with things like the Ritalins, the methylphenidate category drugs, there seems to be maybe some neuroprotective effects for some of them even too. With caffeine, there's definitely neuroprotective literature, huge benefits that caffeine improves all-cause death, but also some things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and other brain aging phenomena. So I think from a brain health perspective, caffeine especially would be the stimulant of choice. But if you got severe ADHD and don't have the ability to do neurofeedback, it may be a valid way to, really get some good support. Again, overall, they're safe and effective when used as prescribed, but over-reliance can cause trouble, and there are people I know who can't go off them for a couple of days, and that causes some trouble once you're there. So, stimulants are powerful tools. They sharpen the brain in the moment especially, but long-term brain health doesn't come from stimulants. It comes from training the brain, either through meditation, sleep hacking, neurofeedback, etc. So I really think that we need to have a perspective of building resources, not just shifting states. So you can also find that in all of the drug categories, there's different things that happen. In the ADHD medication categories will generally reduce theta and low beta when it's excessive, and increase low beta when it's weak, closer to a non-ADHD profile, basically. But I'm going to show you some data in a second that there are some differences there. Also, the alpha effect from stimulants, from prescription and from caffeine, is a paradoxical one. If you're under-aroused, you're tired, you're inattentive, you're really burnt out, the alpha goes up when you take caffeine and other stimulants, but it goes down if your brain is not poorly rested, basically. So it looks like caffeine and other stimulants can make some brains relax. So you can see paradoxical effects, and it's not just for fatigue. I'll show you in a moment a brain of somebody who had a very complicated mixed anxiety and ADHD phenomena and would get primarily anxiolytic or anxiety support from the stimulant. And we would typically think of stimulants as raising beta waves. And in this case, it would reduce some beta for her, and some other things there too. So, there's a bunch of things around fatigue and energy that can happen. But again, we have this therapeutic use versus tolerance versus, dose management. So I think it's a fairly useful, but maybe a tool you should be cautious around. El Chatterino, hey there, how's it going? Is it easy to spot migraines, or is that an iffy game? Is it easy to spot them? I mean, when they're happening, it's really easy to spot them, or just before they're happening, sure. In other people, no. You can't see them in a brain map, for instance. You may see, I have a series of phenotypes I look for, El Chad, and for each one I have 3 or 4 possibilities depending on what else I've seen. And if I see bilateral temporal difficulties, especially in slow brain waves, I will generally ask people about tinnitus, vestibular issues, and a proneness for migraines. And, bilateral delta, especially bilateral theta in the mid-temporals, T3, T4, you can sometimes get a migrainous pattern seen as that other phenomena, as that delta especially. But it's not super reliable as a phenotype for that. It's more likely to be generic brain fog, or even some vestibular issues or some tinnitus are potentially more of a valid read for bilateral slow brain waves in the mid-temporals. But migraines can be a thing from that in the maps. But no, generally it's hard to spot in the EEG. Hey, Ilya, how's it going? Is the Yerkes-Dodson curve derived from research specifically looking at intersection of arousal and performance? It is. Or was it derived another way? No. It's definitely derived from looking at performance under stress, and then increasing the stress and seeing what happens to performance and mapping it. Yeah, it's classic research, arousal versus performance. As you go up in stress or arousal, your performance also goes up. So you have this kind of improving curve. But then at some point, the arousal's gone up too much, the performance stops going up, and you curve, you tank. And so hanging out in the eustress, in the good stress place, just enough stress, is sort of the idea. And I believe this shows up in animals as well as humans. It's often oversimplified, though. The Yerkes-Dodson research is often considered just that stress, and performance have a trade-off, and there's a sweet spot. But that seems to only be true of complex tasks. You can give people simple tasks, rote tasks, or very easy to repeat tasks, and the stress can go up quite a bit before people will start to degrade. What that means is that some aspects of things like e-gaming or sports or business that are so stressful, performance may go up and up and up because you're doing one judgment, one motion, one set of things that are heavily overlearned, especially in things like esports, e-gaming sports. The idea there might be that you can hit the button on the thing under extremely high arousal or stress with good improved support in performance and less degradation of performance at that super high level. But that's only true for simple things. Regular tasks that have some complexity degrade as stress goes up above a certain level, but improve before you hit that level. So find your own sweet spot. Radar Ashwood's asking, what do I think about the CPT test? It seems limited as a test of ADHD to me. I love the CPT test. Radar, you should do a CPT test with me and have me read it for you and tell you about your attention using the IVA2 or a TOVA or something. It's really useful. I find it to be really powerful for teasing apart aspects of attention, stress, sleep, auditory versus visual, so sensory. Really super useful. I find the IVA or the CPT in general, when used properly, to be as informative as the map side of a QEEG. The raw trace side of a QEEG adds something that is hard to replicate. But the maps, while informative, are not precise. And the IVA, or the other CPTs, I use the IVA too, CPTs are generally robust, stable across test administrations relatively, and they're valid, good face validity in their labels, their constructs. They're a tiny bit sensitive to like fatigue and stress, but the brain maps are not really sensitive to how you're feeling, but they're hard to interpret. So I think putting both of those things in contrast is super useful. If you've worked with me, you've done an IVA2 and a QEEG, and we put them side by side, and we walk through them both, and they really do complement each other quite a bit, where the attention tests paint out a landscape, and then the QEEG can add a lot of color to what you're looking at and help really refine some of the ideas you developed in the attention testing. So I'm a big fan of that. Joe Barr, hey Joe, are certain sources more neuroprotective than others? Of stimulants? Yeah, I think the methylphenidate category is neuroprotective. I believe there is some research showing that the narcolepsy class of drugs, when used to fix sleep, is neuroprotective because it offsets the sleep issue, which is hugely impactful, not in a good way, on your brain. I don't think there's any clear evidence on Adderall and other dexamphetamine categories being neuroprotective, but there are a few studies showing brains changing in a developmentally appropriate way when given stimulants. So don't know is the short answer. But again, there's a dosing thing here where if you go up too much in some of these drugs, you can get in trouble. Joe Barr's asking, are certain sources of caffeine more neuroprotective? Yes. Now that's a subtle question. The short answer is probably we don't know. The long answer is probably we don't know. I believe that black coffee, when it's high quality, may be among the highest source because of the extreme large amount of polyphenols in it. And I think that tea, with its caffeine and L-theanine and other polyphenols, is also very, very good. I have a hunch that the caffeine is going to win there, but I think it may be a little bit particular. If you need more alpha, more GABA, then the tea may actually feel significantly better for your performance. I mean, the British, conquered half the world on tea, so it's probably good, for brain performance. But there's lots of literature showing that coffee, in countries that have coffee as part of the culture more deeply, you get a significant reduction in all-cause death. So, and in some of the places like Turkey and Finland, when they've looked at high coffee consumption, they find something very interesting in lifelong, extremely high coffee drinkers, where the health benefits go up as you look at people that drink more and more coffee, but the health benefits asymptote, basically. And they found extremely high coffee drinkers, and they found that the health benefits stopped accumulating at something like 27 cups or something. It was absurdly high. Not that there was harm for these people, but they were still getting benefit up until that level. Now, other people would have had significant problems at that level. So there's a huge inter-individual variability in how we metabolize caffeine. And we will talk about a little bit of that in just a moment. So let me show you some slides. Let's see. Just a couple more minutes of this, and let me get my slides here on the screen for you. Here we go. All right, so this is your brain on stimulants. Let me move myself off a little bit. Oh, not that. I'll go over here. Up in the corner. All right. So the first one I have for you is a Concerta map. And this is that one I was mentioning that is atypical. The baseline QEEG is on the left. You can see peeking out next to my head, there's some some theta that's quite strong. You can also see some beta waves that are quite strong. There's a color scale there that's kind of hard to see, but those red is about 3 standard deviations above average. So really, really intense. And theta usually means ADHD. Theta on the left, but next to the ear, C3, usually means inattentiveness. And excess theta on the right typically means impulsivity. And I've included the attention testing that we were just talking about, the IVA2. The left side of that test with the blue and purple and red bars is the attention side. And the other side is this done? Let's see. Take the wires off if so. Oh yeah, it is. Cool. All right. Oops. So you can see that there's a lot of concentration of energy at the front midline for this person. And that's true of the beta as well as the theta. So theta is like a disinhibition. It puts the brain, or that part of the brain, in a more automatic mode. So it'll react to outside stimuli, but it's hard to direct what it's doing more voluntarily and more on plan. And the left side is really intense here, which tends to mean a lot of inattentiveness, as I said. And you can see on that first set of bars, even without zooming in, we're missing some bars. There's big gaps out of the left side of that attention test. And that's ADD type stuff. And so this person was taking Concerta, and she was getting pretty good results with neurofeedback and was having some good changes, but was noticing that her attention wasn't that bad anymore without Concerta in her system, but her anxiety was worse without Concerta. And her parents didn't believe her. Her parents said, no, that doesn't make sense. Stimulants will make you anxious. You shouldn't have stimulants with your strong anxiety. And she said, yeah, but when my Concerta wears off, I get more anxious. And so we just decided to look at her brain. And this is done pretty much a day apart or something. And the one at the top is showing her brain at rest, no Concerta. And, this is her brain after some neurofeedback, but it's still not wonderful. And then she came back, and the very next day did another brain map, or a few days later, actually. And you can see the huge change there at the bottom with Concerta. And now it brought the theta down, which is what one would expect. And it brought the alpha down, the neutral tone down, which is what one would expect. It's sort of boosting fast brain waves is the theory and reducing slow brain waves. Okay, so far the thetas and the alphas are good. But the beta waves, it actually brought down beta on the front midline. You can see all this beta on this person's brain, which is usually an obsessiveness, an intrusive thought, perseverative, kind of hyperactive front midline. And when it's beta, you get OCD type features. When it's theta, you tend to get like ticking and picking, songs in your head, biting your nails, that kind of stuff. And this person had all that stuff, classic OCD and other intrusive stuff going on. And when she's on the stimulant, the theta is reduced and the beta is reduced. So the inhibitory tone provided by the stimulant was enough to give her brain natural inhibitory tone over the beta. Really powerful stuff. And you can see how strongly it normalized the IVA scores too. So I forgot who it was. Was it Radar Ashwood just, damning the CPT with faint praise here? This shows us exactly why I use it. We can see the changes in the brain and the performance in both of these. And I think that's super useful. It's also something that you can take anywhere. So a psychologist or a therapist or anyone else who uses CPTs will read them roughly the same way. But somebody who reads brain maps probably read them the same way if they're good, but you got to find somebody good. So this validates the whole process for a lot of people. All right, let me show you another one. And this is somebody with, this is Adderall. So this is a little bit of an atypical response as well. So the baseline shows a lot of low power in the upper right-hand corner of the brain in delta and theta. Oh, sorry, I flipped out the brainwave labels. The first column is delta, second column is theta. And you can see in the second set of rows what the stimulants with Adderall did. It actually normalized some of the deltas and the thetas and the alphas. And that's what I was saying earlier, that if you're really tired, you're really under-aroused, then stimulants can sometimes relax you. And we're seeing that in the slow brain waves coming up. But we can also see, if you look very carefully, the beta waves in the front of the head are more blue. And so it is producing a bit of a fatigue state for this person, this Adderall. All right, next one. So here's a triptych for you. A baseline, a caffeine, and an Adderall. So in this case, I wanted, again, to include this because this person was super excited to look at all three states. And you can see the delta waves, that leftmost column, is showing some significant action, where it starts off fine, typical, green. And then the fourth row, those red clusters are coherence or connectivity. And there's a little bit of delta connectivity right below my head, 4 down. You can see those red lines. That's the delta waves being kind of stuck together by a couple of standard deviations off the mean. So probably a little bit of brain fog or residual fatigue. And this person had some of that. And on caffeine, interestingly enough, the delta got increased and the brain fog connectivity patterns, the delta hypercoherence, did too. And you can now see some front midline beta in the rightmost column of each page, where it's bringing up the beta waves. The caffeine bringing up beta is not that surprising. And then Adderall, again, the slow brain waves, deltas, and the delta connectivity got worse on Adderall, and the beta waves got a little bit worse too. And so this person was experiencing actually degraded performance on stimulants. And so they were just double checking essentially that they were done with their Adderall. This is after a course of neurofeedback. So you can see 3 maps done over 2 days. And they were checking their new baseline on the left. That's after 3 months of neurofeedback or something. And then they came back later on that day, did a caffeinated map, and then they came back the next morning and did an Adderall map. And they didn't love how the Adderall felt. They didn't perform any better than their baseline. But the Adderall produced these fatigue signatures, suggesting they were getting like an over-medication effect, essentially. So you can sort of see, infer anyways, the impact of the neurofeedback from the medication, because their former dose is now producing a lot of fatigue. All right, just a couple more for you tonight. Here is somebody who likes to do lots of things. And so they had a baseline map done on the left, and the map on the right is a mixed one. They're like, oh, I have all this stuff in my system, I forgot. I was like, well, what do you have in your system? And they said, well, caffeine, I had coffee today. Okay. Oh, I also had Adderall. Yeah, I had my Adderall too. Okay. Oh, wait, was I supposed not to smoke weed? I think I smoked, I smoked a lot of weed last night. Oh, I smoked some this morning too, actually, on the way here. Oh, okay. So let's grab a map. And then the map on the left was actually done the next day, or no, sorry, a week later or something. But the map on the right is the Adderall, caffeine, and cannabis map. And what you can see, this is Laplacian montage. What you can see is the alpha waves have gone more blue on the right front corner of the head. So I wonder if any of you guys who are watching this can tell me, what does it mean when your alpha goes blue on the right side of the head right there? So it means less alpha. But what does that feel like? What happens when somebody drops their alpha? I'm going to hold off for a second answering that question and show you that the linked ears montage of the same person actually looks really different. So for the peanut gallery, what do you guys think? What happens when alpha goes strongly blue like that on the right front corner? All right, next page, same person. You can see that here in a linked ears montage, we have a slightly different pattern. Here we actually see that the beta and the alpha show a dip in power. Now it's not really right front alpha, it's global alpha. Linked ears is not very good at spatial resolution, so it makes sense. But we can see a little bit of spatial resolution in the relative power alpha as a anterior cingulate, little blue blob right there. So this one makes me think the person is kind of like, having executive function issues with the increased blue, and also obsessiveness with the front midline low power alpha. But okay, so we have some volunteers. Jehan is offering alpha asymmetry active on the right. Means more approach, better mood. Active on the left. Yes, that would mean active on the left. But low power alpha on the right means the right can't relax. The right can't turn off. And the right job is to be an avoid system. So left is approach, right is avoid. Too much alpha on the left can yield depression or low mood or low motivation, but too little alpha on the right can do the same thing. Our grumpy old man stops relaxing and has no chill and goes, oh, things suck, things are gonna, okay, it's all gonna go, it's too hard, leave me alone. And that doesn't stop. And that's the lack of alpha in the right front corner. So I don't remember what this person was experiencing. I intentionally just looked at data for its own sake today. But that is not comfortable alpha, that right front alpha dropping. Also, you can see the beta dropped as well. And so they had stimulants, 2 types of stimulants, and some weed. And theoretically, weed brings up alpha and theta and slow brain waves. And all they look like is extra tired and maybe a little depressed. All right. And then we have, here's just a basic one, just to show you there's a lot of variability across people. This is actually a typical map in terms of showing a fairly typical person on the left who had a little bit of, fatigue here and there, some delta creeping on the edges of the head. You can see some beta in the, some blue in the beta, so some fatigue. And the map on the right actually abolished the top rows, slow brain waves, the delta and the I guess mostly the delta went away, but it took the whole power down a little bit. It dampened the power of the brain, and caffeine does that if you're tired. So what you're seeing is the fatigue creeping up with the increased blue, but the yellow in the delta, especially left column, getting better suggests the brain is waking up subjectively while you're tiring it out and seeing the fatigue. So when the caffeine wears off, you're going to not feel very good. This is somebody who's using caffeine who can use caffeine to mask feeling tired, but they're not going to feel good once it doesn't land well, once it wears off. I'm also noticing on this brain map, we can tell why this person, I see a couple of professionals on the chat tonight. So can you guys tell me from this map why this person relies on caffeine so much? There's another feature, another phenotype here we're seeing. It's kind of subtle, and so you'll need skilled eyes to track it. But I'll give you a hint and tell you it shows up in both the absolute power and the relative power row. So which phenotype is it? Professionals or skilled individuals who are on the channel? I'll give a couple seconds to think about it. El Chad's asking, what if you had more low alpha over high alpha across the front? Would that still be a depression signature or a bit more going on? Those are probably not, if you see both low and high alpha, yeah, it can be depression signature essentially. If you look at Andy Luchter's cordance measure in the EEG, I believe that's a measure of absolute power over relative power. It's a ratio, right? On FP1 and FP2. So yeah, that shifts 10 days after you start a antidepressant. If it's going to work, you'll get a shift in cordance, which is again the ratio of relative to absolute or absolute to relative power. I think it's alpha in the front. Give you some reading, El Chad. Look up Andy Luchter's work and tell me, look up the algorithm, build that into your Cuban norm database. That'd be useful to sort of be able to pull the cordance measure out. I don't believe any of the commercial product databases have included cordance, but it's the kind of thing where you can do a QEEG, take an SSRI, 10 days later do another QEEG, and you can see the change if it's going to be felt a month later. So you can use this really in advance to figure out which medications are already shifting your brain even before you can see it in your experience or feel it. So let's see. Do I have one more? I might have one more for you. I think I have one more. Oh, was there any guesses? Let's see. There's a good observation. Radar Ashwood is saying caffeine's reducing high beta. Yeah, it's making somebody tired. But if you look very carefully, we can see in relative power in the first map in theta, in absolute power in the first map in beta at C3. There's this dearth of C3 showing up, dearth of beta at C3, and it's being replaced by theta. And the caffeine's actually helping that. It's abolishing the relative blob of orange in theta. Now, that's likely related to a phenomena of sleep maintenance. This person's probably not sleeping very well. They can't stay asleep that well. That's a C3 feature for most people. So sustaining the mode, the wakefulness mode, as well as the sleep mode, is often done there at C3. So this makes me think they're a little tired in the map on the left, chronically sleep deprived because of a sleep issue, And the map on the right is them waking the brain up enough to push through it. And let's see, here we go. Here's somebody who again, baseline versus caffeine again. And here, it's a mix. It's a bit paradoxical. You can see that there's more blue in the top row potentially, and the thetas and alphas, so maybe they're a bit overactivated. The bottom row, that beta hypercoherence is pretty strong, so overactivated. The general power in the alpha, just this increased blue in general in the column of alpha, suggests they're overdosed with their caffeine. So, and yet there's less delta of the in the connectivity, the coherence, the red lines are breaking up. So there's definitely, again, a feeling of waking up, even though this person's probably feeling kind of over caffeinated, kind of anxious, kind of shaky. Here's somebody else. This is a more typical. So again, you can see that C3 beta, or left-sided beta, can be seen as a fatigue phenomenon. Another person that likely is not getting good sleep maintenance. And that's that blob of blue there on the left-hand side of the head being replaced in this case by both theta and alpha. And so it's probably some ADHD mixed with a sleep maintenance feature. And then the beta shows all this connectivity in the fourth row that suggests there's some anxiety and some sensory stuff. And the caffeine map actually wakes the brain up nicely, and it brings the blue up, which it should, which is great. And it actually wakes up the back of the brain in the alphas. Now, it does show that there's a fair amount of red lines jumping out. So it does look like it's adding a little bit of anxiety, but it is waking this person up. El Chad's asking, so they just putting off burnout? Yeah, maybe, by using caffeine this way instead of just, or in addition, working on that beta. But yeah, you should really not just mask, but address. And, you know, you could make a change on this kind of person on the left. You know, neurofeedback changes these kinds of maps by about one color shade, one standard deviation every 25 sessions or so, maybe 30 sessions. But a couple of months of neurofeedback to move a chunk up the bell curve is very doable. And so this kind of map is sort of begging for very classic neurofeedback just to address the executive function and the sleep issue. And I would also guess a mood difficulty here. A lot of that low power beta in the first map and the alpha in the first map is showing left front. So again, less of an approach with all that alpha. So in this case, the caffeine woke them up, but probably didn't help their mood. And I, would recommend training all those things while you're going after one thing. Jayhan's asking, is there a course that can impart to us your wisdom in a systematic way? No, sorry. I mean, which bit of wisdom? I don't know. I have a lot going on. I'm working on a way to track a lot of this stuff for one individual, to put a lot of indexed information in and get a lot of decision making out of it. So that might be part of what you might be asking for. Do I have one more? I don't. That's my last one. All right, so those are the slides for tonight. I thought you guys might enjoy. A couple of these were unusual, and I thought that, anyone can show you that beta goes up and theta goes down with caffeine, but I wanted to show you a few complicated ones that were mixed, a couple paradoxical ones, and then a standard one. So Raider Ashwood is asking, can I train burnout away? Can neurofeedback train burnout away? Probably. I mean, we do. Yeah. You regulate sleep, executive function, mood, motivation, then creativity. I get a lot of 40s and 50s and 60s burnt out CEOs that are wildly successful and miserable, and they can't think or feel their emotions that well, and they're locked up, and they come in because of their sleep, which is really anxiety, or they come in because of their sleep, which is really apnea, or because of their anger, which is really depression, or or a bunch of other stuff. And you work on their brain, and you help them with their main core feature. But then, you really get this sort of blooming of the person. And so what you're actually working on is often this sort of peak performance perspective. And that's really where the burnout stuff can be addressed after the core regulatory features of attention, stress, and sleep are handled. Helping someone feel creative and inspired by letting them sit in their own emotional state, gently, an aware state with like alpha theta for neurofeedback, for instance, really powerful for somebody who spends, decades in a go, go, go mode and then is allowed to shift into a different mode. So it's kind of nice. Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out with me tonight, guys. It's been a nice hour. If you have any more questions, lay them on me before we break. Otherwise, I'll see you in a week or so. And wait, did I answer my Radar saying, did you answer my question about whether neurofeedback can reduce the need for sleep? I did not. Thanks for reminding me. Neurofeedback can reduce the need for sleep, but not if you're already getting your right amount of sleep. What I've seen a lot actually is people who come in and say, well, I sleep fine. And you dig a little bit and they go to bed at like 10 and wake up at like 8 and they sleep like the dead for like 10 hours and they don't feel rested in the morning. That's a sleep maintenance issue. That's not good sleep, by the way. And so in people like that, which is not that uncommon to get like a kid who can't be woken up or an adult who always tired, falls asleep instantly, sleeps super deeply, never feels rested. In those people, when you do the brain training, what happens is their sleep hours suddenly compress. So instead of getting 9, 10, 11 hours, they're getting like 7. The quality feels way better. People start reporting, whoa, hey, I woke up at 6 a.m. and got up today, and I normally need way more sleep, and I expected to feel crappy, but I feel really good. Okay. And then what'll happen is they'll sleep 2 or 3 nights in a way like that, and then the brain will sort of reassert and you'll get an extra hour thrown back in. So you go from like 10 hours of crappy to like 6 hours of really good to like 7 or 7.5 of really good. So yeah, the brain seems to be able to optimize in that way. And there are people for whom getting 4 hours a night, 5 hours a night is their natural state. It's kind of rare, but it does happen. But if you're somebody for whom 7 3/4 or 8 hours or whatever is your natural, you're probably not going to train your brain in such a way that it drops to like 4 hours of sleep in a way that is going to be performant or optimal. So probably not. But if you need more sleep than you're getting or more sleep than you think you're feeling because of something being off, then yes, then addressing those things is something neurofeedback can do quite a bit. So, all right. Well, guys, you have a lovely day. Oh, here's another question. Great show. Thanks, Jehan. Appreciate it. Radar saying, do you find that some clients need way less sleep than others? I mean, yes, there's a lot of human variability. I need less sleep than most people. I go to bed around 9 or 10 and I get up at 4 or a little earlier. Like my alarm is set for 4 just because I've been setting alarms for decades, but I usually wake up about 3:30, 3:45 and go, oh yeah, probably should get up. Cool. So I probably get around, 9:45 is not uncommon to 3:45. So about 6 hours. And I can do 6 hours day in, day out, year in, year out and feel amazing if, and only if, the circadian rhythm is well locked in. I can't get 6 hours going to bed at midnight and getting up at 6 a.m. Doesn't work for me. Or 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. I can only do it when I get up super early. So for me, my circadian rhythm really enjoys a 4 a.m. or a 4:30 wake up time. It may have something to do with the fact that I was, a teenage baker in New England, bicycling my bicycle up the hill in the middle of summer at 3:30 in the morning for several years. But whatever reason, when I stay up normal hours and go to bed at 10 or 11, get up at even 8, I don't feel very good, don't feel very rested. And my sleep trackers and things, they will acknowledge that I had kind of iffy sleep and I got, okay, enough deep, but maybe not. But if I'm going to bed properly, routinely, I can even push it and be like, oh, only got 4.5 hours last night, but look at my Oura ring and it's like, good for you for getting 2 hours of deep still. So that's the trick. If you can regulate your deep sleep and get it no matter what, no matter how long your sleep is, no matter when you go to bed, one way of doing that is to never vary your wake time. Varying your bedtime is fine, but never vary your wake time. Super important for circadian support. So more on sleep. You can watch a live stream on sleep. I have a couple ones on biohacking sleep. I have several on topics we touched on tonight, including ADHD, including SMR frequencies, which is the core of how you work with the brain in executive function. So if you want me to dig deeper into those topics again, just let me know. Happy to do anything you wish for a topic. Do me a favor though, if you like this content, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not. Only about 2/3 of you are. So go ahead and give me a like and a subscribe. maybe a comment, maybe share the video with some friends on another platform that sacrifice some attention to the YouTube God's algorithm. But either way, guys, until I talk to you again, hope you have a wonderful week.